During World War II, Nazis would destroy art that they considered degenerate. Generally, this meant a challenge to the culture of nationalism, racial purity, and bowing down to oppressive authority, as well as German tradition, which really was just a tactic used by Nazis to try to get more people to succumb to them in an attempt to recreate a fake anti-Semitic world.
This created a conflict of ideas between Impressionists, artists, and nationalists, Germans. This was undoubtedly a tragedy, but in the eyes of the Nazis, it was a triumph, to abolish all signs of rebellion during World War II.
Hitler and his regime particularly detested Impressionist and avant-garde artists because they went against his agenda of clear and monotone ideas. Art that was more one-sided and cautious, such as works by Arno Breker, a German sculptor adored by the Nazi leader. Arno Breker's pieces were used and displayed by Nazis to show the opposite of degenerate art. Art that showed some of the values most important to the regime: blatant patriotism, discipline, and a return to what was a simpler time for people scared of social inclusion.
Many of the artists themselves represented exactly what Hitler loved. Picasso, for example, was famously indulgent and adulterous, which showed clearly in his art. Picasso's pieces that included varying and seemingly random shapes and colors mixed with sexual imagery is actually what caused him to rise to the top of Hitler's list of degenerate artists.
More obviously, Hitler despised the Jewish people, as he committed possibly the single most anti-Semitic act and movement in history. Consequently, it is not hard to see why every Jewish artist's works were named degenerate. We got in touch with Carla Shapro, a professor at UC Berkeley, where I stand now. She specializes in Nazi-looted art and legal claims to recover them. Miss Shapro was not comfortable being recorded, but she was able to provide answers to our questions. This is an excerpt of one of her answers to our question about the post-war experiences for families and individuals that lost art. Their movable and immovable property, in many instances, represented their heritage, their identities, their means of making a living and surviving. As to the effects, different people responded in different ways. Cultural objects often have special meaning to their owners and their families, such as a favorite painting that hung in a family living room, a treasured piano or violin, a book handed down through many generations, and many other objects of culture that may have held memories or meaning for their owners and their families. This quote emphasizes the emotional impact that losing art and objects had on families. In reports in the media, this is hardly mentioned. Because of the mass genocide, the emotional trauma caused by loss of objects and art pieces is often overlooked. Undoubtedly, the two elements of tragedy go hand in hand, for example with Chasing Portraits, a project made by the great-granddaughter of a painter killed in the Holocaust. She repieced and reconstructed artworks made by her great-grandfather and found healing in both rediscovering lost family objects and retracing the steps in a family member lost to pogrom. Here's an excerpt of her documentary trailer.
My great-grandfather's paintings are so much more to me than art objects. These paintings are like family members to me. To touch his work is to bridge what was lost in the Holocaust and to feel connected with him.
In this video by Cambridge University, Professor Sir Richard Evans outlines some of the difficulty involved in reclaiming lost art.
The British government under Tony Blair felt it was necessary to set up a panel which would adjudicate on these claims, not in a legal sense, but in a moral sense, because legally the statutes of limitation mean that legal claims for almost all of these claims have expired.
Once again, the moral and emotional side of losing art is shown. One of the biggest questions about degenerate art is why was Hitler so scared of degenerate art and the influence it might have on the populace? One possible reason is that Hitler was somewhat of a failed artist himself, and he understood art in the way it can convey ideas. Adolf's paintings were very rigid, disciplined, and one-dimensional. Scarily so. John Gunther, the socioeconomist and philosopher, wrote this after seeing some of his pieces. They are prosaic, utterly devoid of rhythm, color, feeling, or spiritual imagination. They are architect sketches, painful and precise draftsmanship, nothing more. This kind of blunt criticism and his overall failure as an artist caused him to be bitter towards impressionists who were making it big doing something that he considered so vulgar.
In conclusion, Impressionist art was rattling to the Nazi regime because it was often not disciplined and showed a rebellious spirit, not conforming to traditional art laws. Other factors also contributed to a piece of art or an artist being labeled degenerate, such as being Jewish.
It was undoubtedly a tragedy to have so many pieces of art destroyed and artists persecuted, but after the war, Impressionist and avant-garde art triumphed, overcoming the stigma and shame applied during the war and giving way to a new era of modern and Impressionist art.